Hey everyone, and welcome to Death By, where contestants will earn reps for their arguments or fear elimination. I'm your host, Lauren Kalil. Whoever I decide has the best arguments through the final round will stand on top of the podium and earn 30 seconds to talk about a topic of their choosing. On today's episode, we have our CrossFit analyst and announcer, Sean Woodland from Talking Elite Fitness. We have affiliate owner and CrossFit analyst Chase Ingram with Get With The Programming. We have CrossFit Games reporter Nikki Brazier with Kettlebells and Cocktails. And we have CrossFit Games athlete Tim Paulson, who's now on Team CrossFit East Nashville Proven. Let's play Death By. Team and age group quarterfinals, they wrapped up this weekend, and now we wait for the video review process and the leaderboard to be finalized. Specifically looking at the team workouts, were these tests an appropriate set of tests for this stage in competition? 30 seconds on the clock. Chase, you're an expert programmer. What are your thoughts?
They did the job of the balance between types of ways to test team strategy, communication, as well as you need to test for the fittest. So test one had 4 people working together. You had mixed pairs working in synchro. You had same-sex working in synchro and sharing work, as well as seeing strength manifested in reps in a relay style format testing individuals. So I believe format wise, they actually accomplished the task of filtering the fittest and best grouped teams together into semifinals. So I would say a resounding yes.
Okay, Nikki, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I fully agree. I think we saw kind of a wide array of everything, right? We've got the time domains 5 to 7, and then that mid-range in 15, and then that 18 to 25 sort of like endurance-y style range. We saw team elements tested, communication styles with synchro movements, and then we also saw some more individual style relay things. I love seeing like the push-pull style, very classic CrossFit in event 3, followed by that like 2-part event, which we know is sort of the fun and magic that happens in the open. So I think they did a good job testing everything across the board, and I'm excited to see where everyone lands in semis.
All right, Tim, you were able to actually test out these workouts. Have you recovered, and what do you think?
I think these guys nailed it. They did a great job as far as formats go. The tests were high skill enough to allow the elite teams to separate themselves. But I think you're kind of running into the same problem where they're not necessarily approachable by the masses. The loading was incredibly heavy on a lot of the events. There was a really high skill demand. So I think for testing teams to semifinals, they nailed it. But I think as far as looking at, do you want to encourage participation and have more people doing these team quarterfinals, they may have missed the mark a little bit. So yes, mostly, with a little bit of no.
So Sean, do you think that this should have been for the masses or actually to test athletes to advance to the next stage?
There's a competition for the masses, and that's called the Open. After that, it is supposed to be hard. We are supposed to cut down the field significantly, and we are supposed to get the best teams to semifinals. There's nothing worse than getting to the semifinals and seeing a team or an individual just sit there and staring at an implement because they cannot do the movement. I think these tests ensured that you're not going to have that problem when you get to semis. I'm not the programming guy, but I always tend to take a look at who made it through. And if there was chaos at the top of the leaderboard with some of the teams, then I might say, well, we might need to take another look at this. But the teams that are the best in the world are the teams that you would expect to be the best in the world. And to me, that says that the tests were appropriate for this stage of competition.
All right. End of round 1. We have Chase and Nikki tied in second with 3 points, and then Sean and Tim tied with 4 points in first. Moving on to the next round, and after this one, somebody's going to be eliminated. So this is where you really need to work on earning those points, ladies and gents. In individual quarterfinals, we saw 2 new movements, both the single crossovers and V-ups. For team and age group, though, no new movement. So should these divisions have tested a new movement? 45 seconds on the clock. Tim, this time we are going to start with you.
All right. Actually, the Masters got the wall-facing handstand push-up, the age groups did, and I think it's appropriate for them to possibly test new movements because they are still individuals, and from a judging standpoint, it's a little bit easier. I think for teams in online competition, you're already having a lot of video review stress put on the system because of all the synchronicity, because of a lot of the nuances of coordinating 4 people in a workout, on video, all of these things. And I think that necessarily adding a new element to the team competition when you're already demanding synchronicity and a lot of other things like that could just potentially be a little bit too much stress for this stage of the season. And I think those movements are probably better reserved for semifinals on the games, when you have the live judging there and things can be a little bit more clearly laid out as far as what the expectations are for the team.
Nikki, you actually disagree with Tim and you think that there should be new movements at this stage. Why?
Like, y'all don't want anyone to have as much fun as the individuals. Is that what's happening here? Just wondering. Because I personally think that there are always going to be judging difficulties. There's always going to be scrutiny on some movements that are harder to judge than others, regardless of how many times we've seen them appear in competition. And look, a brand new judge may be watching someone do air squats. You don't know. Arguably, I think that wall facing handstand push-ups are easier to judge than some people doing double unders or GHD setups. But mainly, I think that we tout the Open as this big, fun, open arms family fitness event that everyone should participate in and be encouraged to do. And for most people, that means just participation, but also for a lot of people, that means quarterfinals. Not everyone. And I think the cream is still going to rise to the top when you find the people that are going to semis and going to games. But for everyone else, when their final goal is just quarterfinals, I think they should have some fun. I think we should encourage them to participate and get to do what the big dogs do because it's part of the experience.
Sean, any thoughts to that?
I have a lot of thoughts to that. First of all, I think the patron saying a full send is 100% correct. Peace and blessings be upon him. We do not want to put new movements in a team competition that already has a layer of complexity that you do not see in the individual competition. Could you imagine if we had 4 athletes on the floor doing synchro V-ups and the consternation that that would have caused not only amongst the athletes, but online as well? You know, anytime you add a new movement, you're opening yourself up to, another added level of chaos that you already have built into the teams. You don't need to mess with that. Let the individuals have their fun and do their thing. A lot of people who are individuals, do team as well. So you have, a good crossover there. If you want to have fun and experience new movements, do the individual competition or mess around with them in your gym, but don't inject them into the team competition at that stage. We do not need any more chaos and complexity in this level of competition.
Well, how about the points of grossly forgetting that we do have new movements in the team qualifier, which is the dumbbell synchro thruster. That is a new movement for the teams. And box jumps to 30 inches and 24 inches in the age group is also a new movement. Now, I think those things are fine to put in there, but as Tim said, V-ups for something like this in an age demographic of a group that can't even turn their phone the right way when they're putting on an online video is probably not the best idea. But I think putting new movements in similar functions like a thruster or a box jump to 30 inches is totally fine. And putting in a wall-facing handstand push-up for the age groupers is new, even though they didn't do that in the Open, but they also didn't do it in the CrossFit Games for the age group division. So we skipped an entire section of competition in semifinals and introduced something brand new to the age groupers in quarterfinals.
Okay, any final thoughts before somebody is eliminated?
No, I think your hair
My
looks lovely
final
today. And Lauren.
I can't believe
I think your dog is
I can't
cute.
believe y'all are hitting on, I can't believe y'all are hitting on grandma and grandpa doing CrossFit. Okay, who cares what direction their phone is turned?
It's not the fact that they're doing it. It's the fact that they're calling someone half their age to figure out how to record the video and then upload it. And that conversation probably lasts 3 hours.
But
I think
let them
on
do
the
it.
whole-
Let them do it. Who cares if they're not going to semifinals? Why do you give a shit? Let them play.
Final thoughts, and I think Chase will agree with me here, is being very careful about the movements we put in online qualifiers, I think is the most important thing. So less so what new movement you introduce, but more so kind of, I guess, how you introduce it, like how easy it is to judge, how easy it is to see on video review, how much confusion is it going to cause, and have we seen it at any other point in the season where athletes have a frame of reference for what they should be doing? Because looking at a scorecard and seeing still photos of somebody doing a movement is not the same as seeing it in competition and seeing it judged live in a competition.
I'll follow up with saying anyone that judges the programming based off who qualifies should probably not judge the programming going forward much more again, because just because the fittest moved on does not mean the test was appropriate. It means they're the fittest for a reason. It'd be the same reason why judging CrossFit Games programming because Matt, Tia, and Rich won. They'll win whatever comes up. That doesn't necessarily mean the programming was great. So the argument that the best teams and the best people advanced is not a good argument when judging the programming itself.
Okay, I'm going to put 10 seconds on the clock because right now, to be eliminated, it's either Chase or Sean. You guys are tied at 7. Nikki and Tim are safe, tied at 8. 10 seconds on the clock. Final thoughts. Sean, go.
Final thoughts. Yeah, no new movements. You don't want any more chaos. We don't need any more people, second guessing, judging, and trying to make this thing any more complicated than it needs to be. Keep it simple. Keep it down the middle. Get the right teams to semifinals. End of story.
You got to earn the right to get to new movements, and making it to quarterfinals worldwide in the age group division is not that.
Oh, man. Sean, I hate to do it because you're my coworker, man, but you have been eliminated.
That is weak sauce. Weak right there. The show is ridiculous. It should be immediately canceled.
He's out. He's out. 3 left. Moving to round number 3. Now points will clear. Everybody starts with a clean slate. We have, for the first time, we are seeing an entire season programmed by Adrian Bosman. In the open, we saw a few bottlenecks like the ring muscle-ups in 23.1 and the strict handstand push-ups in 23.3, but they weren't until later in the workouts. For quarterfinals, we saw some workouts with bottlenecks towards the beginning, such as an individual test 2 with the crossovers, and then test 3 with the 185, 275 clean and jerk. But then age group, we saw strict handstand push-ups for masters 55 plus as the first movement. What does having these early bottlenecks say about the evolution of the sport? Nikki, I will let you begin. 1 minute on the clock this time.
It shows that we don't have any room for bitching anymore, truly. I just think that, at the end of the day, we've always seen bottlenecks. It's not brand new. We've seen them in the open year over year, even going way back to the OG days of CrossFit. But I feel like if you're asking about what it means evolution-wise, it means that we are no longer as concerned with the perception of not as many folks getting through, and we really don't give a shit if people are being crybabies about it. At the end of the day, we're testing the fitness that needs to be tested to figure out who should advance. Not who should be the fittest on earth at this stage, but who should advance, and it is warranted for the growth of the sport.
Chase, what are your thoughts to that?
I think when you describe fitness, you need to keep in mind that fitness is that broad base of general physical preparedness. And when you look at one-offs that are the roadblocks in a lot of these tests, the wall-facing handstand push-ups for the individuals, the weight for the individuals, the crossovers for the individuals, you're starting to see a lot of tests that have a one movement gatekeeper outside the realm of overall fitness. You're not talking fitness when you talk strict inverted gymnastics. You're not talking fitness only when you're talking about the heaviest weight we've seen ever programmed on a one-off basis, like the clean and jerks in the individual quarterfinals. So you have to understand is that when you talk about broad general fitness being tested, it needs to be that broad in general. We're seeing a lot of specificity with gymnastics and weightlifting and unique skill test movements that are actually the elements that determine who will be successful and not successful in some of these tests. So we're starting to see a trend of these one-off movements versus the overall tests themselves individually.
Tim, do you want to weigh in on this one?
Absolutely.
And then we'll go back to Nikki.
So I agree with Chase that we're seeing a lot of execution-based tests, and we're seeing some tests that come down to a single movement more often. As long as they're well balanced throughout the course of a weekend, I think, at the stage of the games, it's probably more appropriate there and less appropriate when you only have 5 tests, like maybe in quarterfinals where one movement is a big delineator. And I think the other thing that kind of comes back to it is I think we have to remember what quarterfinals is for. And it's, I guess, twofold. Quarterfinals is about advancing the fittest athletes to semifinals. Yes, number one. But number two, it's still not a mass participatory event, but there's a lot of participation in quarterfinals. And the numbers on participation in quarterfinals this year were pretty low as a percentage of the people who qualified. And I think some of that probably comes down to these bottleneck tests being early on. You can still have a great test of fitness that's a little bit more approachable for the masses, quote unquote, the top 10% in the open individual category, while still clearing people through to the next stage. And I think maybe a little bit more balance of that could possibly, could help drive the sport forward. More participation in quarterfinals means more money in the CrossFit ecosystem, means better semifinals, and all those things kind of build on one another. So I think that part is important. And if we look at the age group workout where the wall-facing handstand push-ups were first, If you put those last in that triplet and you just spin it back around the other direction, it's still almost the exact same workout. It's still a great test, and more people get to at least get a score on the board and get to start playing, and you don't see some of the issues that we had come up where people weren't able to get a rep, submit a score, and things like that just kind of floating around. So I think it's a good thing for the sport, but I think it needs to be balanced based on the stage of competition and the breadth of the test that we're looking for at that point.
All right. The next contestant to be eliminated with 3 points in this round is Chase Ingram. Nikki and Tim will advance.
The battle finishes.
Before leaderboards are finalized, HQ conducts a video review process. Some athletes, they choose to make their videos public, but a big majority of them, they decide to keep them private. What would be the impact if all athletes made their videos public for the community to weigh in on? 1 minute on the clock. Nikki, we will start with you.
I think this is really hard. Like I am kind of doing this and being like, I think we should kind of let it happen, because on the one hand, like, the internet is just such a garbage fire, and I hate the hate that exists out there. And I hate the armchair experts and the people who really make it their mission to, I mean, everybody can have an opinion, but there are some people who really make it their mission to go out there and like personally attack people. And I think that more of that would happen if we made more videos public for the community. But I also think that, there's something to be said about moving in the direction of being a larger, more mainstream sport. And every other sport subjects itself to the public eye in that respect. We have replays and we have public scrutiny that happen on the world's largest sports stages. So it's really hard for me to say that would kind of help get us in that direction, because I hate it online so much. And I do think that it's important to think about the athletes' mental health, and this would seriously take a toll on them. So it's a hard kind of like, yeah, from me.
Okay, Tim, what are your thoughts? You're pretty passionate on this topic.
No trepidation. Yes, everybody should release their videos. And honestly, I think CrossFit should release all of them. I've always released a lot of my videos, open, quarterfinals. I put them all out for the public eye because, frankly, if you don't have anything to hide, you shouldn't care. And I think that a lot of athletes, whether intentionally or not, know that they might be getting away with some shit, and they try and hide it from the public eye so that they don't necessarily, I guess, have to take public accountability for it. And this may be being a little bit harsh, but I think that if you move well, if you follow the movement standards, if you're trying to perform these workouts to your best ability while following the rules, you shouldn't have anything to hide. So I think from an athlete standpoint, if you are doing the workouts correctly, you shouldn't be worried about it. And I think, looking at it from CrossFit's perspective, I think honestly they should also release all the videos, because it creates some accountability between the community and them, because then we can watch the videos that they are judging, and we can look at them and we can see, like, what was a major penalty, what was appealed but forgiven. We can kind of go through that process with them, because right now it's a lot of like cloak and dagger and shadows, and we kind of just see this list of penalties that comes out, but we don't see almost all the videos. So it kind of makes you wonder, like, if someone gets a penalty for not opening their hip while facing the wall for a handstand push-up, what does that even look like? Like, anatomically, that doesn't make sense to me. So, there are some things where I would just like to see what these videos look like, because again, I think it would be good for the sport in the long run to have these videos made public so that we can all see them. And again, there's a little bit of mutual accountability between CrossFit, between the athletes, between the community, and hopefully in the long run, there's a little bit more faith in the video review process and in, kind of the validity of the leaderboards at the end of each stage of competition.
Solid arguments on both sides. Both of you guys are now tied 3 for 3. Our last and final round before we announce our first winner. Here we go. The number of games qualifying spots at semifinals, they've been announced, with the most spots awarded to North America East and Europe for both men and women. Women in Europe and North America will receive 11 tickets each, and the men in Europe will receive 11, and North America East gets 12. So, of those two regions, which will have the biggest upset when it comes to who will earn themselves a games ticket? 1 minute on the clock. Tim, we'll let you kick off this final round.
All right. Semifinals this year are going to be so much fun. I'm so excited to watch, especially these super semis are going to be just so hyper competitive. It's going to be awesome. My answer is North America East men. I think as far as like general depth of field goes, the European women probably have the most maybe perennial games athletes who you think will qualify. But I think for the North America East men, when you're looking at the number of people who you expect to qualify, who have some perennial games experience, they do well at the semifinals level, that number is really big. And then beneath that, I think is where you've got the strongest spoilers. And I think that's why we're probably going to see some big upsets in North America East. So mostly because you have a lot of people in any given event that could play spoiler to a games perennial. They could really kind of push them down
10
the
seconds.
leaderboard on one given event. So I think North America East men is probably going to see some upsets, and we're going to have some sad fans.
Okay, Nikki, who do you have?
Okay, so also agree semifinals is going to be amazing this year. I actually picked North America West, which I know was not an option, but hear me out. I'm just thinking that I'm not convinced that anyone is guaranteed a spot on the podium. And on the men's side, especially in the last couple of seasons, it's been a total dogfight. I'm not ready to be like, Justin is the next Matt. He's going to have 5 titles under his belt, NBD. So you've got Justin and Pat at the top of the leaderboard over there, but you've got some really hungry dudes underneath them, like Cole Griesaber, Nick Matthew, and also some huge names like Brent and Chandler. I would not sleep on any of those dudes. And especially from what I've seen, like on sort of social media posts, what we saw at Wodapalooza just a few months ago, like people are ready. They're ready to come out swinging and take that top spot away from Justin if possible. And I think, yes, it is possible.
And that is the end of round 5 with a total score of 5-6. Tim, you are the Podium Pedestal winner. 30 seconds on the clock. Your topic of your choosing. Here we go. Time starts now.
Topic of my choosing is semifinals. I want details. We're only 6 weeks away from my team competing in the first week of the North America East semifinals, and we don't know what the scoring system is going to be. We don't know what the prize purses are going to be. And I think it's just about time we get that information pretty soon here. And I'm also going to give one more shout out to please put the worm at semifinals. I know it's a pain in the butt to ship all over the world, but it's an important element of testing team fitness. Give me my worm.
Give Tim his worm, his final thoughts. Thank you guys so much. Tim, Sean, Chase, Nikki. This was so much fun. And Tim is our first ever winner of Death by.
Death by death metal.
Cue his rock music.
Cue Vice Grip by Parkway Drive. Send it out.
Thanks, guys. We will see you in 2 weeks. Next week, we will have our second roster of guests. And you can find us on the Talking Elite Fitness YouTube channel. We'll see you then.